the average person is totally intimidated by art or thinks it's a complete sham. A lot of people think, you don't work for a living. This is bullshit. Anybody could do that. It's hilarious. Frank Stella's mother was in the Museum of Modern Art one day, and there's a couple of women were standing there and said, God, my 8-year-old could do that. And she said, my 24-year-old did that,
I personally think that anyone can be an artist. I mean, I really do. I think that it has to do with the observation. It has to do with being free to just express yourself.
Well, artist it became an honor to be called an artist, or one had to earn the right to call oneself an artist. I mean, that's for sure. But there's so many people who are making objects and who are practicing art.
Battling with paint and canvas for days and days or weeks or months on end. And so then finally coming and arriving at something.
My purpose is not, when I'm painting, is not to satisfy a broad audience. If it does, I'm delighted.
If somebody doesn't like it, they don't like it. Or if they don't get where I'm going, it doesn't bother me. And in fact, it almost works in another kind of way, because if the work isn't particularly popular, or if there are a lot of people who don't get it, I know that I'm going where I want to go, which is where somebody hasn't been before.
I'm not afraid of criticism. I think I take it with a grain of salt. It's one of those things that you have to, you can take a little bit of somebody's criticism, the things that are true in your heart, and just get rid of the rest of it, because everybody's going to have their opinion, and that's what makes art great, because we all have a different aesthetic. We all have different, we're all attracted to different things.
What I do hope is that there will be a response that would say, of all the visual things that are available, I'm willing to stop and look at this. This grabs me enough to get my attention. And maybe it's enough to make me think and feel in some way.
Basically, for I guess 45 or more years now, I'm trying to figure out how to make a valid painting. Now, what's a valid painting is, I'm not quite sure. The only thing I can tell you is that as an artist, I think your job is you're trying to make an inanimate object have a life of its own.
There's so many different interior explorations that people go through, each of which is unique and valuable in a certain way, that it's for me, there's no one definition. I think I admire anybody who tries to invent something, visually or with words or anything like that. What matters most to me is that it's unique, and so in that way, it's the struggle for clarity. That when I read the struggle for clarity in any art form, then I admire it, and I know somebody is on a journey that I recognize, and that to me is what art is.
And obviously there's creative people in all fields, and that's a way of looking at things. There's all kinds of conceptual artists that don't necessarily create anything. So I don't think you necessarily have to create something and put it in a gallery and sell it to be an artist.
What is it that you're going to do next? And I always am trying to think about something, hopefully, that I haven't done yet. But that, you're kidding yourself a bit when you think that, because you naturally are going to be pulling up a lot of what you know so well, or think you know so well, from the past. But hopefully there's going to be something added that you haven't brought into the whole thing yet, and you dread the thought of spending a fair bit of time on some hopelessly boring object.
You can't escape yourself as hard as you try. So there's going to be a common thread because you have comfort zones too. I keep trying to reinvent myself, but when I stand in front of a blank canvas, somehow this feels more comfortable than this, and I'm constantly trying to stretch myself.
I'm always trying to compete in a kind of sense, I guess, with my ideas. And before I could get really into making a painting, it seems I have to have a pretty good idea of what the problem is I've set for myself.
One of the problems is to work on a organization or a structure that will allow for an intuitive discovery of something else.
The work is very intuitive. It's more of an instinct.
I just sort of see things kind of like, for me, kind of right or maybe not quite right. And that's the intuitive process. And I think isn't that kind of what a good part of art is all about? I mean, it seems to me it is, and you could say this and you could say that, but, there's a lot of ways to make it work, but you're trying to find one of those ways.
Because there's always the danger that anytime you want to be truly original, you're handing yourself a crock of shit. Because we know too much, we see too much, it's all around there. It's not a valid goal. The valid goal for me was to see each new canvas as its own problem. And more than anything else, it's going to be to select which direction will allow this thing to have its own integrity and have its own internal demands externalized and resolved.
People frequently say, God, you must have so much fun. Not that I don't enjoy what I'm doing, but it's not amusing or happy. It's work. It's problem solving, and you try to answer it, and there's always more than one solution. Or if you get to a solution during the process, there's 20 decisions you could have made.
There are a lot of issues and techniques and artistic problems, visual problems, classic problems, intuitive problems that exist, or try to get to exist in one plane, in one spot in time, and it seems very complicated sometimes. So a lot of times I just don't think about it, I just do it.
Because mostly I'm selecting, as things go on, the ideas that bounce around, suggesting themselves. When I sit down, I see all the possibilities that I can at that moment. The next moment I may see other possibilities.
Okay, I could go this way, that way. Which way are you going to go with me? And you make decisions, but then you have to question yourself, what if I'd have done this? What if I'd have done that? And all the work actually comes out of itself. I started something when everything is interconnected, even though it visually looks radically different. But there's a connection between this and that, even though they're miles apart.
So you start out with an idea, but I think what you think are good ideas, very often, only in part maybe, do they enter the success of the final work, and probably the excitement about what you start out to do is necessary to get you going, but it's probably going to change, and maybe change drastically. And I think that's where the art comes in.
When I'm building, it's a lot like jazz, because you kind of have an idea, you have a structure to it, you understand where you're going to go, but then there's a lot of improvising.
When I'm looking at my work, the work that I think is most successful is work which has resolved intellectual issues or can be analyzed on that plane, but at the same time is this other emotionally charged situation that may or may not happen. It doesn't happen for everybody with every piece. I mean, there's certainly some works that I know it's happened, and I look at that and think, wow, can I do that again?
I have to believe that intelligence matters. If you're solving problems, you're using your brains.
I don't know what actually, would define an artist and a craftsperson, or an artist and a non-artist. It's a fine line.
A craftsman, they learned to predetermine what the result will be, and that will dominate the result. It's how well you craft the object to meet the learned standard that you had before.
Or the craftsman takes real pride in the object. They polish and buff that goddamn thing till it's got a perfect shine on it and set it there and point to it. And artists don't do that. The focal point is in here.
Making a painting is a craft. You have to learn how to build a painting so that the thing holds up and it's made very much like a piece of furniture. The paint is layered the same way. You sand between the layers. The layers have to adhere. It has to last. Somebody has to make the stretcher bar. Somebody's made the canvas. Someone makes it. So the whole thing is craft.
In the broadest sense, because none of these things are absolute when you get near a tight middle. In the broadest sense, there's a certain amount of that in my painting. There's craftsmanship. I know how to handle the simple tools that I use, the beat-up brush or the non-beat-up brush, the amount of water I use to thin it, whether I will use medium or not, blah, 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 blah.
I mean, this is my job. This is how I make a living. I don't have some secret source of income coming in. I'm not a rich kid or anything.
It's my job. And most of the time, it creates great problems for me. And I don't think it's easy. And I don't think it's relaxing. But I can't think of anything else that I would rather be doing.
Yes, it is my work, but I see that word work as being this is my purpose. I guess sometimes I'm fortunate, maybe not fortunate, to be able to have my studio at the same place where I live, and so there's times when it's 1:00 in the morning and something's calling me into my studio. So it's a blessing and a curse.
What I think about is when I look at my work, and I do this because every once in a while when I'm working, I see something I've done that reminds me of somebody else's work. And I take a look at that and think, oh, that's really interesting. That's what that person was thinking about, but I'm not going to go there because he's gone there or she's gone there already. And I don't want to be where that person was. I want to be somewhere that I have found and discovered.
I think the discovery part is the crux to the whole thing. It seems to me that it's kind of why you're doing it, is to find something that you can live with, that's created a new kind of excitement.
It has never been, I've never allowed it to be, or it has never been an idea of I know enough and I can stop here.
You know, yes, I'm going to go and explore other directions, and I am exploring other directions, but I'm not done with this one yet. You know, I'm not. And there's still a lot of area to explore in what I'm currently doing.
Part of the process is constantly looking and observing and questioning everything.
We all, in some areas, want something we can perceive easily and comfortably. And that ain't art. Decorative work and gorgeous decoration is magnificent. It's wonderful. It can be overwhelming. It can be mind-blowing, but it will not be mind developing in the same way that I think the showing the battle of art really is.
And it's a fight. I think I always win the fight, but I think you have to also have a real respect for the thing you're doing, because knowing there's two important questions: where to start and when to stop.
I think when somebody really looks at these things, and with the pieces that are most successful, is what I'm hoping is that the piece is complete enough and confusing enough a little bit so that whoever is looking at it stops trying to think about it and just experiences what's there.
For me, the rewarding part of art is when something comes out, not necessarily spontaneously, but when something comes out that you can really feel that you're not bullshitting yourself. That you can look at it and say, hey, you know, I got somewhere with this thing. This is kind of maybe what I do or what I'm going to do, or it fits in with my thinking about things. And then, and that's, in my opinion, kind of why you do all this.